Great, awesome. All right, let's kick into this. So, hi, I'm Janine Davis, and that's Robyn. Do a little wave, Robyn. Hey. So I am an executive coach and facilitator with Evolution, and we do executive coaching and training and facilitation for venture-backed startups. So within that, you know, we do very, very early stage as well as much bigger. So we're working with Glassdoor and Twitter and Slack and a lot of the big tech companies as well. And Robyn, you want to say a couple words about yourself?
Sure. I am Robyn Ward, and I run a coaching and training agency that specializes in early stage, but I guess that's the startup spectrum. So I work with a lot of pre-seed and seed, but I also work with Tala and Next Trucking that are, you know, Series C and beyond. You know, I've been in the startup space my entire career. I've been an operator, a venture capitalist, an angel, an LP. I teach entrepreneurship at USC, and my favorite gig to date is what I do now, which is helping entrepreneurs scale themselves alongside their businesses. Janine and I are good pals and have similar passions, so we were excited to team up and put together this workshop for everybody.
Thank you, Dallin. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So this thing happens. So Robyn and I both have worked with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of startup founders, and something happens pretty consistently with all of them. And that is that they are barraged with inbound information, just jillions of pieces of information come in. It might be from investors, it might be from advisors or mentors, it might be customers, it might be some random person on the street. Sometimes it's solicited and sometimes it is not solicited, but either way, it's just this massive amount of inbound. And for a founder, you know, it really ends up forcing them to sort of struggle between staying grounded in who they are, what their mission is, what their values are, and also staying flexible enough so they can actually take some of that inbound information and use it if they want to, but not taking all of it in. So we're also going to be talking a little bit about focus. You know, how do you know which pieces of information to keep and which to discard? Madame?
Are you going to change my slide for me?
Oh yeah, sorry, I thought I did. Sorry about that. There you go.
Thank you, Madame. All right, so Janine and I are chatty and love to be interactive. So hi, Crystal in the chat. When we're going through this, we would love for people to give us feedback and type in questions. If we don't do it in real time, then we'll get to some of the questions at the end. I would like to know how many people identify with this like whirling tornado right now, right? Maybe right now, meaning 2020, but in general, yeah, I'm gonna raise my hand. Can I get some chat? Crystal's in, Crystal's a participator, I like it. Who else is in, right? Oh, I see hands raised, lots of hands raised, okay. So here's the deal. In normal worlds, which we are not in right now, you know, a startup is a roller coaster, right? By definition, it's a marathon, not a sprint. There's a lot going on. And then we happen to add all of the VUCA, the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity, right? Oh, 2020 equals tornado. Shirley Lee, we with you, you're in the right place, okay? So I used to talk about this tornado before 2020, right? So now the tornado is like tornado times X. Now we're at like Sharknado. I don't know, right? So let's talk about it. How many of you feel like you're at the top of that tornado, right? At the top of the tornado is when you're getting all the inbound that Janine was talking about, right? Unsolicited, solicited, this person, that person. I'm an advisor. I'm a mentor. I'm an investor. I'm, you know, Forbes. I'm this panel and that panel, and I'm this entrepreneur that wants to pick your brain. All of these things are swirling at you, right? And it's easy to get caught up there, right? But here's the thing. Master entrepreneurs know that they've got to get to the bottom. They've got to figure out what are the most important things that move the needle for the business, right? And apologies, that's my counterpart, Joni. She understands the tornado and is trying to exit the room from the tornado. So what you're looking for is, you know, a lot of us get caught up in the quantity. We think that the doing and all of the action is very exciting and we're being busy. but we don't know if we're being productive, and we don't know if we're moving the business forward, right? And we start to say yes a lot because we don't want to say no. We'll get more to that in a minute, right? Mark Suster, great VC in LA, if you're not familiar, Upfront, great firm, has a blog post that talks about you've got to do less to complete more, right? So I sit on a lot of boards, and what happens is the entrepreneur comes in and they list off all the things they're doing. I don't want a checklist of all the tactics you're doing. I want to know the 3 things you did this month and the company did this month to move the ball forward. So what does this mean? This means that you've got to practice focus, right? There's a great story, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, who are now best friends, like famously best friends. I would love to be their best friend. First time they met, they were at this table and somebody said, I want to go around and ask to what each person attributes success. And in unison, those 2 men both said focus, because there's a lot of things that you could be doing. So in order to focus, one of the tools is the big 3 rocks. Anybody hit me up? Anybody hit me up? You use the big 3 rocks. Sometimes it's called MIT's most important tasks, right? So long-term or quarter, you want to have OKRs at some point when you get your business going, or KPIs, but you really also need to check in, because every day can be overwhelming. Every morning, what are my big 3 rocks? What are the most important 3 things I need to do to move the needle on the business today? Otherwise, we're ticking lots of boxes and we're not moving the needle on the business, right? And so what does that require? That requires getting really good at saying no, right? Another Buffett quote, stop me if I get to 3, because then I might need help. But another Buffett quote is, the most successful people are the people that are great. Thank you, Shirley Lee, for sharing. Are the people that are great at saying no. Right? So Janine's actually trained in Brene Brown, and she and I both like to think that Brene is our dear friend. But Brene Brown talks a lot about the difficulties of saying no, particularly for women, because a lot of us want to make sure everybody likes us. So sometimes it can be very hard to say no, right? So there's actually a research study by UC Berkeley that says the more difficulty you have saying no, the more likely you are to experience stress, burnout, and depression. Okay. Well, if you know any numbers of entrepreneurship, those numbers are already higher. So you don't want to make them higher for yourself. You want to get really good at saying no and practicing ruthless prioritization. The good news is people won't hold it against you because you're an entrepreneur. Just literally you can say, I'm in the midst of company building. It's a really important time for me and my business. Unfortunately, I'm unable to meet you right now, right? My hack is that I create some of those and save them as templates, so that every time it comes up, instead of letting it sit in an email and make you feel guilty and ruminate in your mind, you just get it out. Folks will find another entrepreneur that may have time. They're not going to hold it against you, right? So get good at saying no. Get good at knowing your big 3 rocks. Get good at knowing, are you focusing on the big priorities of the business? And don't spin around the top of that funnel where you're likely to burn out, right? The name of the game is the marathon. And if you're running a sprint and you're stuck in this tornado, you're definitely going to hit burnout zone. Janine.
So we move on to then what happens when you're in burnout zone. And one of the ways to avoid that is to make sure that you are grounded. When you're not grounded, what ends up happening, so, Robyn talked about the funnel, you've got all this inbound information. If you don't take some of her tips or do some steps to make sure that you are not in this spinning vortex, 2 things happen with most entrepreneurs. They tend to go to one of 2 extremes. So one extreme is they're open doors and accept everybody's information and are completely malleable. And every time somebody says, oh, you should do this or you should do that, they do it. And it ends up creating a mess. If you think about if you are about to pitch and you ask 20 people for their input on your deck, you're going to get 20 completely different answers. And if you start to actually modify your deck, you're going to have a mess at the end of it. So that is definitely not going to work. At the other extreme, some people, if you've not created some sort of boundaries or some ways to make sure that you're really super solid in who you are as a founder and what your company's about, you shut everything off because it's too painful. It's so overwhelming and it creates so much anxiety because you're not sure what to accept or what not to accept. You're just like, screw it, shut everything down. And so, you know, your goal as an entrepreneur is to find the balance point, which I think truthfully is about everybody's goal for everything in life ever. Perfect middle ground, so that you are able to really be grounded and you know who you are and you know what your company is about and where you can draw boundaries, and that allows you to accept some degree of input from others. So the first step to that is finding your North Star. So really, you know, you need to know as a founder, and very early on, you should be able to define your mission and your vision and ideally your values, and no more than like 3 to 5 core values that define the way that you're going to function in the world. Some of you might have heard of Simon Sinek. He did a very famous TED Talk about essentially defining your why. What is the reason that you exist and your company exists? And it's really important, if you want to ground in yourself as an entrepreneur, to know what those things are. So don't wait and put them off and do them later. A lot of times, even you know, companies that are fairly far along, they still have not really codified their mission, their vision, or their values. And it's sort of this like deer in the headlights thing. It's also important because as a founder, you want to really define your culture early. Because if you don't, it will define itself. You will have a culture for your company. It's a question of whether you have deliberately defined it or it has defined itself. And the bedrock to defining your culture is mission, vision, and values. So that is step one to being grounded. Well, yeah, let me let Robyn take over from here, and we'll dig into some other stuff on grounding later.
Awesome. So from what Janine is talking about, having a strong vision and purpose, that often leads to conviction and confidence. And, you know, these are 2 core things that you will hear investors talk about in terms of like what they were looking for in a founder, why they made an investment. And it's, you know, it really comes down to, does the founder have an almost, and I say almost, seriously, an almost unhealthy obsession with the problem that their business is solving, right? And then is that founder the right person to solve it? And so the interesting thing about this is that's what everybody's looking for in you, which is to say, your early hires are looking that you have conviction and confidence because they're taking a risk and maybe not going to Facebook, who's going to pay them an obscene amount compared to what you might be able to pay them. Your early suppliers, your early vendors, your early partners, because people would rather partner with established businesses. So what is the thing that's getting them on board? They may buy into your vision, but they also need to buy into this conviction and confidence that you can execute. Because there's a lot of people with ideas. The difference between ideas and execution, that's where you really start to differentiate entrepreneurs, right? Now, the most important person that conviction and confidence matters for is you, the entrepreneur, right? To truly hold conviction and confidence in the face of what is a lot of rejection. You will get a lot of rejection in fundraising. You will get partners that won't come on board. You may not get that Facebook engineer that you thought was the engineer that was going to lead your team. And through all of that, confidence and conviction is what you hold on to. And what's interesting about confidence and conviction is that they're skills, they're mindsets, right? And so our minds are tricky and complex. Part of the reason why people work with coaches and work with Janine and myself is that, you know, our minds often will tell us things that we believe, and we're not supposed to believe everything that we think, right? And so we can really tap into an inner critic, or we can really train our minds and work on managing our emotions and managing our mindset and developing emotional intelligence such that we are actually not our biggest obstacle, and that we are not leaning into our inner critic, and that we are not becoming our own worst enemy. We are actually our inner champion. And when you come from inner champion, you really tie into confidence and conviction. You, Janine.
Thanks. I also see there's a couple of questions, so let's address those at the end, I think. So Robyn just mentioned emotional intelligence. This is one of my favorite slides ever. So for those that are not necessarily familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, it's fairly basic. We all get triggered by things. So think about even something as simple as a pet peeve, something that really irks you and upsets you that may be a little bit out of whack with the actual situation. That's an indicator that you've been triggered by something. And when we are triggered, we all have our sort of go-to reactive behaviors. So that might be, for me, I tend to withdraw. For some people, they might burst out and really become angry. Things like that will happen. And we also have sort of reactive behaviors that are very typical for us. And there's a whole list of what those might be. So when we become ungrounded, we're almost always triggered. And what happens then is that our sympathetic nervous system takes over. So we might find that our breathing gets really shallow and fast. Our heart starts to beat a lot more quickly. Our stomach might be kind of clenched up. And those are all signs that your amygdala has sort of taken the driver's seat and is running the show. And that is not the part of your brain you want running the show when you are pitching or having a hard conversation, or basically when you're doing anything other than actually, you have a T-Rex in front of your face or something like that. So it's the amygdala is phenomenal when you're actually in fight or flight and need to protect yourself, but otherwise we do not want it in the driver's seat. So the other thing that's interesting about this is that physiologically, your brain reacts identically to what it might perceive as an emotional threat as it would to a physical threat. So there have been studies done where they've watched what happens with the brain if you have, for example, a tiger in front of somebody's face versus somebody that's threatened you from an emotional standpoint. Your brain reacts identically. So there's a lot of ways you can ground. I mean, in fact, if people want to chat out ways that they like to ground, for me and Robyn, we're both ridiculously obsessed with dogs. So hanging out with dogs is like this instant, calming, has a very instant calming effect on us. For me, I love going to the ocean. It's very calming for me. I like to journal. I like to meditate. Chat out, what are the things that you all do that help you to ground? See what people come up with. Be in nature. Yep, that's a good one. Yoga. Tennis courts. Nice. Yeah, going and just whamming on that ball. That feels good. Aikido. Nice. That's Dana. Hi, Dana. Gratitude journaling. Nice. Cooking. Good one. Yeah, so you can see playing with my kids. So there's a lot of different ways, and what's important is that you need to find your ways, whatever works for you. And there might be a few things that you want to have in your toolbox. But I'm going to share with you now my favorite gift ever. It's one of the simplest, cheapest ways you can reground. It's this lovely breathing gift. And what this represents is something called square breathing, or the 4-breath technique. So I'm just going to shut up for a couple minutes and let everyone just follow the prompts and just notice how you feel afterwards.
Janine, you need to move your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting little details. Okay, so come on back to reality for a moment, and I'd love people to chat out. If you feel any differently now after just doing a couple of minutes of breathing than you did before we started. And it's totally fine if you don't, but I'm just curious if anyone felt a difference. You got a raised hand. You can also raise your hand, that works as well. Instant relief, few raised hands, several raised hands. Yeah, so Again, simplest, cheapest, easiest, do it anytime. I probably do this like 50 times a day. It actually can reset your nervous system just after 2 or 3 minutes. It's all it takes. So it's not necessarily going to last that long. You might get re-triggered again, but if you constantly get in the practice of just remembering when I'm triggered, I need to reground. If I can't go for a walk in nature or play with my kids or find a dog or do whatever, I can breathe. And you can even go, I actually have told some founders that I know, before you pitch or about to do a big presentation, go hide in a bathroom stall and do this for a few minutes before you go out on stage. Okay, off to Robyn.
So I'm just going to talk about a few things that actually bring together much of what Janine's last two slides were talking about, but more focused on the science and sort of the biology of the brain. Because, you know, again, everybody's toolbox is different, and a lot of folks like a visualization and like to understand sort of the science of what is happening. So you can see the amygdala in the back where it says primitive brain. That's reptile brain or monkey brain. And then you have the neocortex and the cortex, the executive brain, which is where your rational thinking, decision-making, judgment is coming from. And so what's interesting is, you know, the back of the brain, the chemicals are, you know, cortisol and testosterone. And in the front of the brain, it's oxytocin and serotonin. And that's very much the like love and bonding. And so what happens is, just due to evolution, all of the information that comes through our brain comes through the amygdala first, back to what Janine was saying. And at one point in time, we were slaying dinosaurs. Now we're mostly slaying our own egos and identities as its intangible danger. But that is the loop through which the information is going, right? So the key is, the first one is just catch yourself. When you're starting to somewhere in your body, feel the tension, feel the stomach that Janine talked about. Maybe it's sweaty palms. Catch your thoughts when they start to move to the negative. So the first is sort of stop and catch, right? That requires self-awareness and isn't easy for everybody, right? That's one of the things that meditation and mindfulness help with. But you stop when you start to feel yourself getting tense or feel yourself leaning into fear. You take a deep breath. As Janine mentioned, you're trying to reset your nervous system. Our breath is actually the best pharmacy we have, right? Like, we actually take a deep breath and we medicate our body instantly. And then the last part is ask. So I'm going to show you, this is very important. What you're doing when you ask yourself a question, for instance, how do I want to react in this moment? And in fact, I would replace the word react, because we don't want to react. We want to respond. How do I want to respond in this moment? What is the outcome I am seeking? What is the next best step? What you're doing is you're activating the executive brain, because what happens is your amygdala can get hijacked, right? Something starts out little and then you ruminate on it and it spirals and it checks in with your limbic brain, which houses all the memories, and literally it taps into like a feeling you had when you were 3, and then it's magnified. So you can get amygdala hijack. So you want to chill the amygdala hijack. You're going to recognize when it happens. You're going to breathe, and then you're going to call upon the executive brain. And when you ask yourself those questions, it may sound silly, go into the bathroom as Janine suggested, asking yourself those questions, you're turning on your rational brain. You're releasing oxytocin and serotonin into your brain, and it starts to quell the amygdala, right? So here's what's interesting. When people just stay in it and they think they're going to calm down, like they stay in an argument, it's like you're battling science. Like, this is happening in your brain. And the more you understand that's happening and the more logic that you have around it, you can say, listen, my chemicals have taken over. I got to walk away. I got to SBA. I got to go on a run. I got to take a break. I got to go in the bathroom and breathe, right? Some people just think that they can power through, and it just cycles and makes, you know, their energy and their anger or their fear or whatever the emotion and the rumination is, it only exacerbates it, right? So what we're trying to do with this is really start to manage the chemicals that are in our body by SBA as a tool. Janine?
So I guess, our last point we want to talk about is just having self-compassion throughout all this process, and focusing and grounding and being a founder is crazy. It's insane and incredibly demanding. And I think Robyn and I both really feel like this statement, nobody, or that I'm crushing it or we're crushing it, it should just be banned from vocabulary, because we both had experiences where we have publicly seen founders claim to be crushing it, and then we coach them, they're not crushing it, they're barely hanging on, they're running on fumes. But part of the drill is that you have to pretend like you're crushing it. That's how you have to act and appear and look to other people. And then, people say it, and so then there's this comparison thing that happens, and people are like, well, they're crushing it, why am I not crushing it? Just trust us, nobody's crushing it. So have compassion for yourself around all of this work. If you try to put some of these practices into place, expect that you're going to take a step forward, then you're going to take a step backwards. It's okay. It's just the process of, becoming more and more aware and becoming more choice about how you react, and showing love and compassion towards yourself as you go along the process. So that is our formal piece of this puzzle. We wanted to leave a lot of spaces just at the end just to answer questions. Looks like some of them, thank you, Shirley, for sharing the best gift ever, the breathing gift.
And I'm watching the chats, and I will say that, we have some folks in here that are sharing tools from their toolkit that are amazing. Like Brendan, thank you for sharing, think about, what your hand feels like. Think the body awareness and going through the body is another way. It's a great presence, grounding exercise, centering. I'm seeing a lot of really, really great tools in here and people sharing. And I know that we have some questions. The last question, which, the hard part, or statement, the hard part is identifying success as not binary, because that is how my investors, my critics, my potential acquirers view success. Indeed, this is part of the challenge, which is most of those people that you referred to often are just concerned with the hockey stick growth. And behind that, you have to be concerned with the complete up and downs that are happening, both in your mind, in your team's mind, and actually in the business. Because as anybody that's an entrepreneur knows, you can be completely on a high one moment and think that you're going to have the biggest and best business. And then like a call goes bad, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm dedicating my life to this. We're going to fail, right? And so the idea is to be able to manage so that you can have some degree of calmness through that storm, right? There's another graphic that I wish we included that most people have probably seen. It's like on the top, it says like the life of an entrepreneur. And it's like,
oh yeah,
up and down and up and down. And the whole idea is to really just try to be the center line of that. A big word that I love for this is equanimity, right? Which is sort of the mental prowess to maintain stability in the ups and downs. And I think it's a real skill that entrepreneurs should focus on developing. It's certainly not easy, but it's extremely helpful in the chaotic environment of a startup. I'm scrolling back up, Janine, just kind of reading. I know there were some more questions.
Feel free to
yeah.
chat.
I knew what I wanted to answer. The reason why I said quote unquote unhealthy obsession is because you will hear investors use that word. I'm not a fan of that word because I'm not a fan of playing around with anything other than health and wellness, because you as the entrepreneur is the number one asset of your business. And if you are happy and healthy, you will build a happy, healthy team and a happy, healthy company. And there's challenges around that. So I don't love it, but honestly, that's a quote that you will hear investors saying, is I'm looking for a founder with an unhealthy obsession with the problem they're solving. So I was sort of tongue in cheeking that, but honestly, the idea for them is just, you are sacrificing 7 to 10 years, potentially more of your life. And why are you doing that, right? This is like an uber level of passion. My biggest questions as an investor often relate to things that throw people off. I actually say, you know, what are your self-soothing habits? What's in your toolkit for when you lose that one big client, right? Do you meditate? Do you have a mindfulness practice? Those aren't normally asked for somebody that might be investing. I want to know, because I'm early if I'm investing. And as an early stage investor, you will hear everyone say, like, it's team first. And at the earliest stage, it's founder first and founding team. And so I want to know that that founding team is healthy. I want to know that that founding team is working on self-awareness and self-inquiry, because the journey is not just for the business, it's a journey of personal growth. And you need to be as healthy as possible on that journey. So hopefully that clarifies that, because, you know, I don't want anybody to take that wrong.
And healthy obsession needs to go along with everybody's crushing it.
And hustle harder, correct, yes.
Those versions of everything. Actually, I can stop sharing at this point. Anybody else have questions? Oh, here we have a couple of new things. Hold on.
How do you balance the idea that a company is a marathon with the VC requirements?
I mean, that goes down to basically everything that we've talked about today, that balance of focus and grounding, because that's going to just be true. Both things are going to be happening concurrently, and you need to figure out how can you stay grounded in the middle of it.
I will also say that a lot of people think about management in terms of managing their people, and your management is managing any people. So you do manage your board and your investors. And I find that sometimes entrepreneurs aren't necessarily thinking in that lens. So, I mean, it'd be a longer conversation, but there are skills to managing your VCs and your boards so that you all are aligned and it doesn't feel like, you know, they have different goals than you or their expectations are different. And some of that is in, you know, the relationship building, but investors actually expect to be managed a little bit. And so sometimes, you know, they want you to manage them. So I find that sometimes entrepreneurs sort of kowtow to investors or a little nervous and, you know, will go and run a lot of reports if an investor asks them, instead of saying, you know, excuse me, how are you going to use this report to help you better understand the business? Or say something like, you know, internally, we're not capturing that particular KPI. We haven't found it to be an important number. Please tell us why you find it to be important, right? Usually the entrepreneur just kind of runs to do all of the work to get to the investor. So I would keep that in mind as well. Any more questions?
Oh, Q&A tab, that's right. Let's see. Tech voice retirement. Oh, it's from, you see it?
Yeah. Goodness, there's a lot of these. Most of them employ or require folks to focus on mental and emotional fitness as much as they do on physical fitness, which is something that Janine and I both are big fans of. So there's a number of different tools and tactics. You know, just reframing. So when you catch yourself in the negative Nancy mode or speaking unkindly to yourself, part of it is like an SBA and a reframe, SBR maybe, stop, breathe, and reframe, which is, you know, in order to be successful, you have to have alignment between your doing, which is your actions, and your being, and which is your thinking and your emotions. And so we really have to get the being, the thinking, and the emotions aligned. So when you say to yourself, well, I'm never going to raise money, or I can't go out and get money, you're playing a fear-based movie in your mind. So what's the reframe to that, right? I don't know. Whoever, you know, I've gotten this far. What's stopping me? You know, we had an angel round. What's stopping me from a seed round? I can tell you, I coach people at all stages. People that got seed are afraid they're not going to get A. People that got A are afraid they're not going to get B. People that got B are afraid they're not going to get C, right? This is not uncommon. And what you need to be telling yourself is, I hustle hard and there's no evidence that I'm not going to get this next round. I got the last round, right? So simple reframing of the stories that you're telling yourself. You know, another confidence builder, confidence is a mindset, and it takes self-talk, but it also takes the work and the practice. So if you are telling yourself that you're not going to go be good at fundraising, then what's your get great at fundraising plan, right? So like, what's the work you can put around it? What's the development plan that you can make so that you feel better presenting to founders?
I'm going to grab the culture one. There's a question here regarding culture. If it's the culture is set in and it's not quite matching up with the mission, vision, and values, how do you get back on track? So first of all, if I approach something like this, I want to figure out what it's gone off the rails specifically. So it depends how many employees you've got. You know, if it's a few of them, you can actually have conversations with larger clients. It's surveys, interviews, churning through data, looking for the trends and things that will explain essentially the root cause of what is happening to disconnect your walk and your talk. And then you really have to be very deliberate about acknowledging what's happened. So if you, for example, say one of your values is that every voice is heard, but in reality what happens in meetings is that the loudest person is the person that is heard and gets their way, there's a disconnect there. And so you really need to face it and decide what are you intentionally going to do to course correct that. And then it's a new practice. So you really have to operationalize the values. That's another thing a lot of companies don't do. They do the mission, the vision and the values, but then they forget to say, first of all, what does that value mean to us? So everyone will say, oh, honesty is a value, but what the hell does that mean? I mean, I know psychopathic liars that think that honesty is a value of theirs. So what does that word mean to you? And then how do you operationalize that? And once you've figured out how we're going to operationalize that and express that value, then, you know, regularly look at those, do like a pulse check on yourself. Are we living into that value or not? If not, what do we need to do? You want to grab the next one, Ms. Robyn?
I see the culture one. Good to come up with a mantra. Oh, that's Julie. Julie, what's your question? Wait, oh.
Oh, I think it's just a suggestion, not a question.
Oh, yeah.
What about,
Julie, sorry.
What about Dana's? You're saying, doesn't that also go back to your company vision, values, and culture, managing board expectations? Dana, can you explain a little bit more what you're asking there? And also, hi. Can folks take themselves off? Oh, there we go. Can you take yourself off mute? Oh,
I just meant that if you're a board, you know, one way to have the board be on board with you is to have them help you come up with your vision and values and all sort of be coming from the same place. Otherwise, I think you're setting yourself up for conflict if you haven't worked through all of that. But I was wondering what your thoughts were.
Well, I think it, you know, you might have different opinion, Robyn. I think it depends of the stage of the company. So when companies are early stage and should be ideally starting with this vision, mission, value stuff, they don't have boards. So they already sort of have to have pre-baked it before they even meet board members or potential advisors. Then maybe, you know, if it has to be refined or how people are expressing values later on as they scale, that's when you might want to get some of that buy-in. But usually you have to do, if you're a founder, you have to do it earlier.
That's true, but wouldn't the board members see what your vision and values are and then naturally being more versus less aligned? I mean, I think that work is very important and also part of bringing on board members that they're aligning with your vision and values. No?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Once you're at that point of bringing them on, absolutely. Thank you.
I am sorry because I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Pornajitra? That is a long question. I'm wondering if we could get you to unmute and ask us this question.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kathy. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah.
Hi. So my question is, when you're first starting to build a product or service, like certain target groups or people may not relate to what you're building, or they might not, their values might not align to what you believe in. or what your focus is, like what percentage would you take into account their opinions, their comments about your business, and would you try and stay focused in what you believe in? How would you navigate through that when you're first starting off?
Well, so this was sort of the gist of actually where Janine and I started this conversation, which is, it is indeed challenging when you've got people that are giving you all kinds of feedback, right? And so this is sort of the know your North Star, know your why, have your conviction. You also don't want to be foolish. And if you can't find somebody that thinks that there's a market and a good idea, not listen, right? Yet at the same time, the expectation of the entrepreneur is a really great skill set of separating, you know, the bone from the steak, and really understanding who are the people that you should trust, or who are the people that might have experience in this space and are offering, you know, case studies and maybe data around why something may or may not work or be a good idea. But you have to also sift through that some with your intuition and your gut, right? Which is another skill to work on developing. I mean, you can't just listen to everybody. I'll give you an example, and I'm sure she won't care that I share. This happens with most founders that raise money, but there's a Taylor Neiman from Toucan, which is a very hot LA business. We were just having a conversation about how many people told her that their business didn't make any sense and wouldn't work, and that, you know, foreign language was learning languages was a very competitive market, right? They have since raised a lot of money and are, you know, obviously success is very long-term, and I don't judge it already, but like they are moving in the right direction and did end up being able to raise and have a successful business for the stage they're at. If she would have listened to, I mean, there were some, you know, real name VCs and some, you know, advisors that were product people that told them that they weren't going down the right path. And she had to sit with herself and her gut and say, which of these pieces of information do I want to take back and have impact me and my conviction and my product? And which ones do I not? And, you know, Janine and I can't give you, unfortunately, a magic number or a percentage or a magic tool. Maybe it's like a you know, a Harry Potter wand that says this person is the person to listen to. You know, it really becomes part of the path and the journey, which is sort of developing a good sense for who you're talking to and what degree of feedback you're taking away from the conversation and actually making changes with. Janine, you have anything to add there?
Nails it. Yeah, I think reiterating that concept that product market fit is not the same thing as somebody that is not values aligned with you. They're different beasts. So recognizing that is important. I think that, you know, that comes up further down in the life cycle as well. I've had a lot of clients now that are questioning, you know, around Black Lives Matter, whether to make a statement or not about it, because their values are pushing them to do so, and they're concerned about lashback from their customer base as well as investors. And it really comes down to, you know, if that's a values question, that's not about the value of the actual product that they're creating. So there's a difference between the two. Do you consider burnout binary or more of a scale? Interesting. I would personally say more of a scale, and also maybe you get to a point of almost no return where you better deal with it or you're in big trouble. But I think all of us ebb and flow in terms of level of burnout. What do you think, Robyn?
Yeah, I don't think, I used to be a very binary thinker, and I've done a lot of coaching to work on that. So I don't think it's binary, but I do think this can happen. I do think that many of the folks that I work with, you're a type A founder, the actual realization that they might be in burnout is binary. In other words, it was a scale and there was a degree to which they could ignore it and like keep pumping and keep pushing. And then there's sort of an aha moment that happens in a very like, holy shit, I burned out. right? So like that piece of it, like the awareness of it, the culmination sort of tends to maybe be a dramatic revelation to them. It usually, probably, I'll speak for, isn't to Janine, like when you're coaching it, you can kind of see it. But you know, what we see and what a client needs to see for themselves, maybe two different moments, but many times, from my experiences, the client has sort of an aha moment, and then they look back and realize that maybe it was happening over a longer period of time, but they happen to just get real with themselves.
Yeah, agreed. And again, ebbs and flows. I've had clients before where they've totally gotten it and they've gotten much better, and then they will call, you know, for an emergency call 6 months later, and everything's gone off the rails. And I'll be like, remember that whole thing about the part where you need to like stop every now and then? They're like, oh yeah. And then they remember it, and then they start to do it again. So it is not finite either. In terms of protecting your mental health as a founder, what is your view about shutting out pessimists, usually friends and family, when you're building something new? I guess my response to that one would be, again, it depends how grounded and focused you are. Is the more you're able to build the muscles of being grounded and being able to focus, the less impact the pessimism might have on you. I mean, if you can shut them out, go for it. It's hard to shut family and friends out though. So I think the thing that you can control is not what they do, but what you can control is how you react to it and how you build up your own resilience.
Sure, and I would just add to that, who you surround yourself with is a component of mental health. You know, shutting out is one version, but, you know, leaning into a crucial conversation, which is just, you know, you're my sister, you're very important to me. It seems like you don't have as much positive thoughts around this business I'm building. And I think maybe, you know, we should agree to talk about other things, right? I mean, if their pessimism is related to the fact that they don't think that your business is going to succeed, but, you know, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of people are practicing this with politics, or I wish a lot of more people would practice it with politics, which is there are many other ways to connect. And if you're not connecting on the one thing, in addition, it will give you practice to leaning into crucial conversations, to which you will have many once you've built a very successful company with lots of people, because part of the skill is how to have the courageous and crucial conversations.
Yes, absolutely. All right. We have probably time for one more if anyone has a question. Otherwise, Julie's going to close this out.
I'll read that. There's a question from Victoria. What strategies are most important when innovating in a male-dominated field?
You go, Ms. Robyn. Take it.
Well, I know we keep saying this, but like we just gave strategies, right? So conviction and confidence, right? Because when you're the only person in the room and the imposter syndrome is high, which it's higher for women or people of color because we haven't seen ourselves in these rooms as much, nothing allows you to shine in that room if you really believe in what you're innovating and you really believe in yourself. Now, again, the conviction and the confidence were tied to what Janine talked about, which was your why and your purpose and your vision, both for yourself and for the company. So I would say that we provided a couple of tools that are going to be very good for you, leaning in and innovating in a world where the people looking back at you might not look exactly like you.
I think that's all the questions. And we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to just wrap things up and once again, thank Janine and Robyn for all this wonderful advice. I think a lot of people don't focus on the soft skills. They don't focus on the mental health, and it's so important, right? It can become a physical problem if your mental problem's not there. So really great to hear a lot of these tips and encouragement. And just before we close, I just want to let people know that tickets are on sale. I encourage you to register for the Women Founders Network Fast Pitch Competition, which is October 27th. And there's 5 amazing and inspirational women founders. They're competing for $40,000 in cash prizes, $135,000 in in-kind services. And we've got Kwanzaa Jones of Supercharged as a keynote speaker. So it's October 27th, being webcast, 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific. And if you're looking for some inspiration, maybe you need to recharge your batteries, I think you'll really get a lot of enjoyment out of watching these amazing women pitch. And you can just go to womenfoundersnetwork.com to register for that. And we look forward to providing additional webinars. Our next one in this series is going to be in middle of November. So please keep in touch with our email list, or keep visiting our site for new events. So thanks everyone for joining us, and that will conclude our webinar.
Bye.